What's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. I'm excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm really excited to have Simon on with us. Simon is one of our MBA clients who's currently at Harvard Business School. And so he just finished going through his summer associate recruiting process for summer 2023. And a phenomenal outcome, which I'll let him tell you about himself. But definitely want to get him come on here and talk about kind of how he was able to achieve his goals, and hopefully just through this conversation also share some insights with you as well that hopefully will help you in your own process. And so, Simon, first of all, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. And if you don't mind, maybe just starting off with a quick introduction of who you are, what your background is, and so that our audience can kind of get a feel for who you are.
Sure thing. Well, thanks for all the kind words, Sam. Pleasure to be here. I guess a bit about me. I was working in Chicago prior to this in corporate finance. Was at a company called Motorola Solutions, which I'm actually repping now. Now that I think about it, I have the sweater on. Before Motorola, I was in real estate private equity, but more on the back office side, so working corporate accounting, and then moved into like a due diligence role before quickly realizing I didn't really like real estate and wanted to be in a different industry. And then before my professional life, I guess I'm going kind of backwards on the resume here, but before my professional life, I was born and raised in Jamaica. Grew up there for the first 16 years of my life and was really into tennis, so wanted to become a professional tennis player and ended up moving from Jamaica to Canada at 16 to pursue that. That didn't end up happening, and so I played college tennis instead in Michigan at Ferris State University. So definitely a non-target school, but had a great sports and athletics program, and spent 4 years there having a really fantastic time on their tennis team. So that's the quick high level about me.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. And so, like I said, well, I guess before we dive into anything else, I guess people always want to know right off the bat, where did you end up? So let's start there.
Yeah, so I'm super excited. I ended up at Morgan Stanley Menlo Park, the tech group. So, in my opinion, probably one of the best groups, especially if you want to go to tech. And for me, it was a one and done process. I only super dayed with one company or one group, and I ended up super daying with the number one in my opinion. And luckily, I got the acceptance, and I'm thrilled to be going there next summer.
Not just your opinion, but my opinion as well. But obviously, bias. So, I guess for those who don't know, I think most people know this, but I also worked at Morgan Stanley Menlo Park back when I was in banking. So, that group has a special place in my heart. But no, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, it's been amazing. I think, even back in my days, like when I was there, 2009, 2010, it was always us, Goldman TMT, and then Catalyst was kind of like the new kid on the block, but they were very good right from the get-go. They were started right around when I was actually at MS. And then now you fast forward kind of 10 plus years later, and I don't think things have changed much in tech banking. It's still kind of those three groups, and
Yeah.
uh and Simon and I were talking about this before we started recording this, but like a lot of my old bosses that I used to work for are still there, and some of them he interviewed with. I like one lady that's still there now. She was like my associate actually, and
Oh
now
wow.
she's a managing director and very senior, and I think she runs, I don't know, their software practice or something like that, right? And so
Is it Kate? Are you talking about Kate?
yeah, I'm not okay, yeah, she was
She's
my
head of West Coast.
oh, she was okay. So she, yeah, even more senior than that. But yeah, she was an associate back when I was there, and but a lot of people have stayed there for a very long time, and they remain just like a total powerhouse, which is really really cool to see. So, um,
Yeah,
but that
agreed.
that's amazing. So obviously, huge congrats to you on that
Thank
outcome.
you.
Um, and so I want to kind of like go back to the beginning then. And so obviously you're going to HBS now, but like at what point did you realize you wanted to do investment banking? Was it when you were working at Motorola, or was it like even before that or after that? Or I mean, I think it was prior to you getting to HBS, because obviously, like, part of the reason for going to HBS was to
Yeah.
banking. Is that right?
Yeah. For context, let me start by saying banking was actually something that I intended and wanted to do in my undergrad. So in my junior year of Ferris State University, I tried recruiting for banks. I think for a variety of reasons it didn't end up happening. And had I known Wall Street Mastermind back then, who knows, maybe it would have. But my case, I'm an international student, also going to like a non-target school. So I did try to network back in the day. Unfortunately, it didn't just happen. It didn't happen. And so things kind of came full circle. I was at Motorola Solutions. I realized, corporate finance was fun at times, but it wasn't exactly fulfilling me. And I wanted a little bit different of a career trajectory. And so was thinking about banking. And that's ultimately why I decided to go and pursue my MBA. With that being said, HBS was not like a typical school for placing bankers. They did a lot of other things. They had a lot of people coming from banking, not very many people going to banking. And so for me, I knew right off the bat that I wanted to prepare myself. Sam and I actually had many chats on LinkedIn over the years leading up to business school. So I knew going in like right away, when did I want to get into the program? When should I start like the not only like the interview prep process, but like networking process. So I had a very like clear strategy going into business school. And one of those strategies was like getting onto a platform, and Wall Street Mastermind was the one that I had the most I guess knowledge and good reviews about, given like the constant communication with Sam prior to business school.
Hmm. That's actually, yeah, that's actually interesting, because I mean, I talked to so many students, and so like I don't like always remember all the details, but like, how did you and I end up connecting or even starting this dialogue? Because I think back then, like, you were still working at Motorola Solutions. Did we just like randomly connect on LinkedIn? You just want to ask me some questions, or
I think it was organic marketing, baby. I think it was a fact that I followed some people who are also interested in banking on LinkedIn, and I would see them share your videos or like post reviews about your videos online. Kind of, I mean, for those of you watching, like Sam obviously is extremely active on LinkedIn as well as other platforms, whether it's Facebook or I don't know if you have a Twitter account, but Facebook and LinkedIn were definitely the ones where I saw the most activity. And you do videos on like 5 tips to approach like networking and banking, or 5 tips on technical interview prep. And these little tidbits are like really helpful nuggets. I think one of those videos caught my eye, and I was like, this seems like a guy I should reach out to. So I had reached out, and I think one of the early things that I realized is like you're very committed to customer service, and I don't say that lightly, but I remember you would reply at pretty much all hours of the day. Like it would be 1 a.m. I would be up spinning my wheels on a banking question, and then all of a sudden I would see Sam typing in the LinkedIn response. So I mean, it was definitely it was cool to see the level of customer service. And then as I went through the actual Wall Street Mastermind application process, that kind of shined through as well. Speaking with Joseph on your recruiting team, he was extremely helpful. I don't even know if I'm allowed to mention this, because it's maybe kind of a one-off situation, but I remember Joseph being like, when I had concerns about actually getting into the program and like in my ability to pay for it, he said, I mean, Simon, if this is something you really want to do, and like payment is a concern, I've worked with certain students in the past in helping them get the right financing in order to like meet the cost of the programs, and we can be strategic about how we structure the payment plan. So like everything from like the funnel point of getting to know Wall Street Mastermind, but even like ability to pay for the program and like make sure it works like for both of us. The whole team was extremely supportive.
that's awesome to hear, man. And yeah, just a great guy. And yeah, I mean, like, on that point, since you brought it up, it's like we never want finances to be like the only reason why somebody who wants to work with us can't work with us, right? Like,
Yeah.
obviously, yes, we are running a business. yes, we are for profit. Like, and so like, yes, there, is a fee to work with us, and all of that is true. But we also just have a lot of conviction in our ability to, well, because like we don't work with everybody, right? Like, um, we only really invite the people in that we're very confident we can get great outcomes for. And obviously, if we get you a great outcome when it comes to investment banking recruiting, we have conviction that you're going to get a massive ROI on your investment, right? And so that's why it's like, if we know you're going to get a massive ROI, then it's just a shame if someone just like they really want to do the program. The only reason they couldn't do it is because they said they don't have enough money or something. Like, obviously, if someone, and our program's not for everyone either. Like, if someone says I don't
Yeah,
want the program because this is not for me, or like this is not what I'm looking for, then that's totally fine, right?
yeah,
And so, but yeah, like we that's kind of how it operates. Like we really only invite people in that we're absolutely confident we can help. And I don't think this was a thing yet back when you joined, because you joined in, what was it, like May, right? May of 2022. Oh no, so this was a thing.
I I would say it was probably okay, yeah, it was probably around that time, maybe a little bit before that.
It was like a little bit before you started your business school, basically,
Yeah,
right? And so okay, so
yeah,
actually by then we had this already, but it was like, because in 2022 was like kind of our first year um offering like people like a money back guarantee option. And it's like, before, when we used to say, we've always operated this way, but before, when we used to say, oh no, we only invite people in that we're absolutely certain we can help. Like, I think a lot of people didn't believe us. They're like, oh, that's just like marketing speak or whatever. And it's like, now, like, we really have no incentive to invite people in that we can help, because if we don't get results, then it's actually a very unprofitable uh transaction for us to
yeah,
have to spend all this time with people and then like, issue a full refund or whatever, right? And so it's just like trying to do right by all the clients that come in the program. And I think it's worked very well for us. And so
I
um
would agree. And I think on the customer side, you can definitely feel that it's a high touch program. I mean, between the Slack channel and then the offline messages, like there's constant communication, and whenever you need a question answered, it is. I'm sure we'll touch on this later in the call, but I mean, the whole reason why I got the offer I did is because in the last week leading up to the Super Day, I got so much support from people across the Wall Street Mastermind community. Just not just the team itself, but other members of the Slack channel and of the Wolf Pack. So yeah, these resources cannot be understated. It's extremely high touch, and they're there for you when you need it. And then Sam, one other thing that I did meant to say on the MBA recruiting front, this might be helpful for all the MBA students who are thinking about, purchasing a Wall Street Mastermind subscription and being part of the team. For me, the way that I thought about it was like, yes, $7,000 is a lot of money, and we're already dishing out hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to business schools, which are hopefully supposed to get us into whatever job we want to. I think the way that I thought about it is, listen, my my cohort or my other classmates are not going to be doing this, and I'm gonna have to compete with schools like Wharton, NYU, Columbia, who have very regimented banking recruiting processes. And so, like, if I need to pay $7,000 additional dollars on a $200,000 school fee to get my best offer, the best offer that I can possibly get, for me, that's a no-brainer. And I think to your point of ROI, it pays off extremely quickly when you get into some of these banks, or really any of these banks. They pay obviously extremely well, but aside from the financial aspect, like getting into a group that is really top notch and one that you're super attracted to, it's everything. It's totally worth it.
yeah, and on that point too, I also want people to know, like, 7K I think was what you paid, right? But in reality, like, the way we work with people is like, since it's mostly like a one-on-one model that we can tailor to each individual. And so like we can customize it based on like what you need help with and how much help you need, and everybody can be slightly different, right? So
Yeah,
I want to say up front for full transparency, because I don't want someone to then like jump on a call with us and say, hey, I want to work with you guys, and then feel like they're surprised, like, oh, how come I'm
yeah,
paying more or I'm paying less or whatever. But regardless, to your
That's
point,
probably fair.
no, and regardless to your point though, it's like when you think about business school, like if you're paying over $200,000 to go to school for 2 years, you're also not working during those 2 years. So I don't know how much money you were making at Motorola. Like if you just stayed there, there's also the opportunity cost of like foregone salary, right? And I would say like most people, after everything is said and done, like the opportunity cost to go to business school is probably easily $400,000 to $500,000, right, for
Yeah.
2 years. And so it's just like it's one of the largest investments that you can ever make in your life, right? Like it's more expensive than college. And college is already really expensive, actually.
Yeah.
And so it's just like if a lot of people you decide to go to business school, um, either because you want to get into investment banking, or even if that's not the only reason, that's a big reason why you're going. And so you kind of should like you should do everything in your power to make sure that you actually get that outcome, right? Because I'm sure
Sure.
like a lot of people are probably thinking like, you know, you already go to a great school like HBS, and to your point, yeah, maybe you guys don't send as many people to banking as Wharton or Columbia or NYU or whatever, but I'm sure banks still come to your school to recruit, right? Because it's HBS. But I think also a lot of MBAs are probably wondering like, hey, like you're paying all this money to go to business school, like we just talked about. You have a career center at School of Career Services, which I'm sure you probably did leverage that too while you were there. I would assume, but like, isn't that what you're already paying for? Like, why not just use that, and why use something additional like Wall Street Mastermind? I mean, like, what would you? How did you think about that specific point? I'm sure it came up
Yeah.
across your mind when you
I
were
think
deciding too.
part of it is before you actually get on campus, you don't really know what those resources are going to look like. So I have no idea what the CPD, career professional development organization at Harvard is going to look like from a resource standpoint around banking. My assumption was that it was going to be pretty limited, meaning they wouldn't give very tailored advice on how to approach networking conversations. They wouldn't give tailored advice on how to actually manage the networking process just from an administrative standpoint. Like, do you have an Excel template for your networking contact logs? Like, how do you manage conversations? How do you keep notes when you have these conversations? Like, all of those things, I wasn't sure what to expect. And those question marks I know would just be totally resolved if I did go through a program like Wall Street Mastermind. Like, some of the most important resources to me as I've gone through this recruiting process is one, your networking log, because I've used it daily for the past however many months, and I have over 100 over 100 contacts in there. And then two, the behavioral, no, not the behavioral questions, but the I think it's called the application and networking modules. I took those before getting to business school, and I started networking right away. And so like another problem that I knew is like I reached out to CPD pre-semester after getting accepted, and they were like, don't worry about networking for or like recruiting. You'll do that stuff once you come to campus. We actually have a blackout period and you're not really supposed to contact banks beforehand. So I was like, well, fuck that. I don't want to be behind. I want to be ahead. Like, especially if I'm going to be competing with other business school students. So that was another pull. Like, I want to be totally ahead of this process. I want to be having conversations before I step foot on campus. And so I knew that Wall Street Mastermind would offer like a channel to do that.
Yeah.
So those are some of the big reasons.
That's actually a really great point. Because I think they were telling it. I mean, we definitely heard stuff like that before, where especially at the MBA level, um, some banks or and some schools have policies where they'll literally give you a list of people from each firm that's like, hey, here are the alumni from our school that you can network with. And then I've even seen some of these lists where they say you can only reach out to one of the 10 people that we listed on this list, and so you had to kind of like pick one person, and then it's almost like
Yeah.
that would be the only person you talk to at the firm, and that person will single-handedly decide based on your conversation with them if you get an interview or not, right? Which is like, actually, if you think about it, quite risky, because doesn't matter how good you are at networking. Like sometimes you might just run into the one person that you don't click with, right?
Yeah. Or you have a bad day, or they have a bad day.
Yeah, they just had a fight with their
Yeah.
wife before getting on the phone with you or something. And so like,
Yeah.
um, and then so like I think like if you network before you get to business school, um, in this case, I guess they did tell you not to, but like most people, if you do network before you go to business school, you can kind of just claim ignorance, right? Like nobody told me that I shouldn't be doing this, and
Yeah.
it is a competitive advantage, right? And then also like from a recruiting timeline standpoint, I think a lot of people who are interested in hearing this interview or that are kind of watching this right now, they're probably people that haven't started business school yet, and maybe they're like incoming or they've already been accepted, but they haven't started yet. And so they might not be aware of just kind of like the MBA recruiting timeline. But
Yeah.
if you can you kind of tell people what your experience was with the timeline in terms of like when does recruiting happen and like when does everything kind of kick off and kind of like all that jazz?
Sure. So, and I will say, like, this is purely representative of HBS's process, and it might be very different from school to school. So keep that in mind and take what I say with a grain of salt. Um, I was kind of shocked when I got to campus. Like HBS has lots of great resources. I'll tell you that right now. It's a fantastic school. So I'm not at all throwing any shade at HBS, but specifically related to their banking recruiting process. What I was a little bit, I guess, shocked by it was that we only had a handful of banks actually come and recruit on campus. So most times, like schools like Wharton and NYU Columbia, they'll have established relationships with pretty much every bank on the street, and all of those banks will come to campus and go through all of these recruiting events, whether it's like large large group informational sessions, small group conversations and coffee chats, blah blah blah, throughout the recruiting process to get to know the students. At HBS, we had maybe 5 or 6 banks come, and the banks that came to campus were like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, New York group specifically, Bank of America, I want to say Evercore, this other bank called Rain, which is more of a up and coming merchant bank. Um, and even Goldman Sachs did not come in typically because there's a couple of reasons behind that, but they did come this year. They came onto campus once, but again, very very limited touch points. And I think to your point, like how it worked was essentially each bank has a campus recruiting rep. So they'll probably have someone on the JP Morgan team who was at HBS himself or herself at some point. They ended up going through the summer recruiting process and joined as an associate, and then they're still at the bank. So they head up the on-campus recruiting. They would be your number one touch point. Normally, you would start off with large group conversation that where they share like information about the bank. Then, if you go to that conversation, you'll be basically on their funnel list and get set up with coffee chats. And depending on how those coffee chats go, the HBS recruiting rep will be kind of your touch point, helping you get connected with other folks. So it's a very regimented process, but like outside of the campus reps and then outside of the 1 or 2 folks that they connect you with, it's very hard to push those conversations forward unless like you're doing a really excellent job and they want to connect you with many more bankers. You feel a little bit limited in the sense of like, okay, I can't work outside of this like MBA recruiting process to go and like find other folks myself. And then outside of that, there's just the limitation of the banks coming to campus. And like if your bank doesn't come to the campus, like for me, like a Catalyst at one point was like super interesting, and I wanted to talk to folks from Catalyst. I couldn't because there was no one from HBS there who was like doing the on-campus recruiting. So I reached out to them outside of like the HBS ecosystem to try to get those conversations started. Unfortunately, Catalyst was a bank that wasn't doing international recruiting this summer, so they were an X on my list. But yeah, there's just certain limitations in the process.
Yeah. Um, so like all of this whole thing that you just described, just to be clear, this is happening when? Like first semester?
Oh yeah. Sorry, timeline.
Oh,
So banking recruiting starts in mid-October,
okay.
actually. So it starts very late. You get to campus August. And I remember having a CPD session, like a career session in late August, early September, maybe mid-September. They were like, no, don't worry about doing anything on the recruiting prep. Like, we're gonna have people start coming to campus mid-October. That's when like recruiting season kicks off and the blackout period ends. And they were also like, don't worry about the technicals, you'll do that over Christmas. Which now in retrospect is like definitely not the case. The whole reason I got the MS Menlo Park tech offer is because I did the super day here in, I mean, early December, right? So if I had done no technical interview prep beforehand, I would not have been getting the offer. So it
That's
even,
wild.
you know, yeah, because they expect you to go through their channel, and their channel says, okay, you start meeting with bankers October 15th. Interview invites happen after a bunch of coffee chats in late November, early December, and then first round interviews are scheduled for January. That's if you go through the platform, they have to follow those dates. If you go outside of the platform and do any banking recruiting yourself, that with banks that aren't on campus, you will be exposed to other recruiting timelines.
Interesting. So a lot of your classmates haven't even interviewed yet. Then, like they're gonna
Correct.
actually come back from break. I actually think
Yeah.
that it sounds like, because we've worked with other MBA students from different schools. It actually sounds like you guys probably just do things a little bit later than some of the other schools. I mean, it's always recruiting always happens during the first semester of your first year. But like a lot of our other MBA students, like they're done with recruiting by the end of their first semester, and so like they don't even get the benefit of having winter break to prep.
Yeah.
But it sounds like maybe, ironically, it's almost like at the MBA level, to your point, I guess the Whartons and the NYUs and Columbias are kind of more the target schools. Um, and it's almost like HBS is a great school, but it almost feels like you guys are more semi-target, where 5 or 6 banks come and then the rest don't. And even the ones that come, they're coming a little bit later, maybe after they've hit
Yeah.
up some of the other schools first.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. There was people with offers in hand basically like midway through my coffee chat sessions. So I definitely felt behind the curve.
yeah,
Yeah,
from
from other schools.
okay, yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. So I guess this begs the question then, because to your point, like Morgan Stanley, they did recruit HBS, but that was their New York office, right? And so like, how did you end up getting this Menlo offer? Because they didn't recruit at HBS, right?
Correct. Yeah, they didn't recruit at HBS, and hence the very, I'd say, consolidated recruiting timeline that was totally outside of like HBS's kind of typical recruiting timeline. So I mean, I first of all, I did I relied on a lot of like the Wall Street Mastermind resources in terms of like cold outreaches. And some of the tactics that I learned through the program was like going on LinkedIn, clicking on like searching for a certain bank, then going and filtering your search by like the school that you go to try to find alumni network at your school. That ended up working, and I found a guy named Mark Tai. And at the time, like I wasn't really thinking groups specifically. I just saw that he worked at Morgan Stanley, and then after kind of looking at his profile, saw, oh, Menlo Park. And I remember from the early days speaking with you, you were like obviously had high praise for the Menlo Park group. So I was like, okay, this seems pretty interesting. So crafted a very individualized email to Mark, kind of talked about the fact that, you know, he was an HBS alum. I'm currently at HBS and wanting to recruit for banking. And the conversation started that way. So we had an initial coffee chat, 30 minutes. And from there, that kind of got the ball rolling. After that, he helped introduce me to one of his colleagues, another associate in the group, spoke with her, Rihanna Shai. Actually, she has a very similar name to you now that I think about it. um, and then after speaking with Rihanna, had a few more chats before it, like I got this kind of like email from one of their recruiting people saying, hey, we want to put you through first round interviews. So it was definitely outside of the HBS process, and kind of required some of that cold email outreach, but it worked out.
Gotcha. Okay. So I guess
Yeah.
going back to the point that I was trying to make when I asked you about the recruiting timelines, like We've already spoken about some of the benefits of uh, kind of just like doing stuff prior to you even starting school. And I think a big because that allows you more flexibility in terms of networking outside of like a very rigid and controlled process once you get to school, but also because everything happens during your first semester on campus, like a lot of your classmates and people who end up being your competition, like they are not really even doing anything or thinking about this stuff until they get to campus, right? And so like
Yeah.
if you start to think about it before that, then you're just going to be ahead of the game, right? And not even just with networking too, but like even with interview prep, I always tell people like even like for example, if you're doing your behavioral interview prep ahead of time and your answers are more polished for that reason, then when you're networking and having these coffee chats with Mark, with the other associates, like that also affects how well you convert or how likely it is that you're going to get the referral for the interview, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like just it never hurts to be prepared before everyone else is prepared, and it never hurts to reach out earlier and try to network when no one else is trying to network. And then also like last point is obviously, um, if your program is not a Wharton or NYU or Columbia, and you're only getting a handful of banks or even select offices that are coming to your school, um, then like you're gonna have to rely on your own efforts to get into other opportunities. Like if you wanted to do tech, then you kind of have to be in the Bay Area, or like ideally you are in the Bay Area, right? And like sounds like most of the Bay Area groups don't proactively come to HBS, right?
Correct.
Um,
Yeah.
and you actually come from a tech background, like working at Motorola Solutions and things like that. So were you like specifically trying to get into the tech group then, or like is a better fit with your background, or was that just kind of like more
Yeah. The way that I approached it was like I knew right away, which was also another I guess added benefit during my recruiting process is like I knew I wanted to target tech or I wanted to target M&A. Like those are the two groups that I was interested in. So depending on how like the bank was structured and whether they had product or whether they had coverage or whether they had like a mix at like Goldman where your coverage groups are dedicated M&A in-house. So that's how I kind of funneled down and filtered out certain groups. um I was always leaning towards the tech side more, just because I'm I think more drawn to like the industry landscape and learning about one specific industry as opposed to getting like broad exposure across different sectors. And then um, I think Morgan Stanley obviously stood high and above when it came to like the tech group. So yeah, tech was definitely my main focus, and I leaned heavily on my Motorola experience like throughout the interviews.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the thing that's
Yeah.
great about MS too is like, a lot of times if you work in a coverage group, they don't do their own M&A work. Like they'll outsource it to like the M&A product team. But at
Yeah.
MS, I know from experience that they actually run all of their own M&A in-house. And so, from that sense, like you actually get a better experience because you do both the coverage side and the product side, right? Uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
so that's
That's a
awesome.
good point.
Yeah. So I guess like can we talk a little bit about um I mean you've kind of already been touching on this throughout this conversation a little bit already, but like what specifically did you do then once you joined Wall Street Mastermind that you found to be like most helpful to you? And also I think a related question to that, which a lot of people are probably wondering, is like what are the things that you did in Wall Street Mastermind that you feel like you would not have been able to do had you not been in Wall Street Mastermind? Like, let's say you just only went to HBS and you didn't join Wall Street Mastermind. Like, what would have been different? Or maybe you could have done it, but not to the degree that you ended up doing it. Like, what were
Yeah.
some of these things?
All right. So if I kind of think back to like the very beginning, I guess the way that I approached it was like right off the bat, I started with a very structured process in terms of like doing the material. So I know Sam puts together, you, Sam, obviously, put together the whole Wall Street Mastermind platform with an end goal in mind, and you were very strategic with how you structured the modules and how they kind of build on one another. So I made sure like I wasn't going to break the process, and I was going to be pretty structured. So I started off going through the secret sauce and then the application and networking modules very early. I did that in August, which now that I think about it, like in retrospect, might not be early for some folks, but it was early relative to my peers at HBS who were doing none of this, right? And I guess one note on that, if you are going through like the MBA process and you want to get into banking and you go to some of these other schools, maybe it's even beneficial for you to start even earlier than August. Like maybe do it beforehand and I don't know, March or February, just because like networking, and this is something that Sam talks about throughout the module, is a very long lead time, and you want to get those conversations started as soon as possible. So um in that sense, maybe I was a little bit behind the ball, but relative to my peers, it was early on.
Mm-hmm.
So started with the secret sauce and then application and networking modules. I then started touching on specific pieces within the behavioral interview process. And so like started to nail down specific questions. So like, tell me about yourself, tell me about a difficult experience, or like walk me through your resume, these types of high level questions that I could start to feel really prepared on the coffee chats. In terms of like the most helpful resources, I touched on it a little bit, but everything from like the networking templates and how like you structure your contacts, I can't underscore this enough. The recruiting process for banking is highly administrative. If there's two things that I've gotten out of like the application process, it's one, learning how to email extremely well, and learning how to manage contacts extremely well. These are not skills that you learn on your own. You learn through repetition, yes, but you also learn through these tips and tricks. And those tips and tricks were all throughout the Wall Street Mastermind, I guess like modules. So like just learning how to follow up, learning how to send different emails, whether it's like if someone hasn't responded to you in 2 or 3 times, like how do you structure that email? If you've just had an interview with a person, how do you structure that thank you email? If this is a cold email reaching out to someone who has no sort of like connection to you, like how do you structure it? You like there was templates for all of that. And I think that like also helped with conversion rates on getting some email responses. So for me, a lot of the administrative burden was just taking out because I had the toolkit and I had the tips and tricks to deal with that. When it came time to actually interviewing, this is when I started to get a little bit more rigid about my learning process. So I went on to the technical interviewing side of things, and I did the accelerated technical mastery module. I think that was like 2.5 hours and gave me like some pretty solid fundamentals. Especially I was coming from a finance background. I had familiarity with some of these things, but it was a good refresher. And then after the accelerated program, again, I kind of picked and choose certain areas that I knew I was weaker at. So like LBO modeling, I had no prior experience, so I watched all the videos on LBO modeling. The practice interviews were also very good. I think there was like a number of practice interviews where you worked with candidates and like you pointed out some good things, some bad things, like things that they could improve on. And just the whole time I was like always taking notes, like where do I need to like really fine tune, and like what are my weakness points? So being kind of like self-reflective. So I would say like my process like started out very structured, going through the material in order, and then closer towards like the interview process, like being able to pick and choose which modules and which videos like were very specific towards me and which ones that I found like highest ROI on, and doing those. Because again, like I had a very limited time process reviewing for Morgan Stanley Menlo Park, so I honestly didn't have all the time in the world to go through the program, which I wish I did. And I think that's like another benefit of starting early is you get to go through the entire thing, which I think is highly valuable. But also the benefit of just like in my case being able to pick and choose certain modules was extremely helpful, and the program is built in such a way that you can do both. But yeah, that was high level my process.
Gotcha. How much time did you have from the time they reached out and said they want to interview you until you had to actually interview? Was it like just a few days?
Yeah. So timing was, I mean, it could have worked out better. What happened was, I think I received an email on a Monday, saying that they wanted to interview me for first rounds on that Thursday.
Mm.
And then first thing I did was like, okay, well, I need to reach out to Wall Street Mastermind because I have like no idea how to even prep for this interview. First
Mm.
thing that happens when I get onto the Slack channel is I see this message saying that there's going to be office hours and that they want to do a practice interview with people. So I reached out to Johnny Wang, who was heading up the practice interview, and I was like, hey, listen, Johnny, I have this interview on Thursday. It's a first round with Morgan Stanley. I've done like zero interview prep, but like I'm relatively decent on the behaviorals. I probably could use some work on the technicals. And he was like, yeah, for sure, man. Like you're in there. We'll do a practice interview. Like his background, I think he had done a super day with Morgan Stanley, so he obviously had a ton of experience to draw from. And we did that practice interview, I think, on the Tuesday, right? So like the very following day, he took me through like maybe a 45 hour long session, was giving like really curated feedback throughout the interview, and then offered some tips and tricks after the interview and saying like, hey, these are some answers you really need to fine tune. Here are some articles, like sent me a ton of resources. um I also had a dedicated Wall Street Mastermind like Simon Levy training group within the platform. So like Sam was in the group, 5 other folks were in the group. And I would just like post questions, and any question that I had, like I would receive responses in a couple hours. So that was like extremely helpful, like given the timeline. Then come Thursday, I sit for my first round. Luckily, it was somewhat conversational and more casual. But a lot of the lessons that I had received and the advice that I had received were helpful during the interview. And then after that first round, I received a second round like a first round interview, but for a second person. And I did that on the Friday. And then following that interview on the Friday, I received a super day offer for the following week. So it was like very, very back to back. And then I spent my week prepping with additional material from the Wall Street Mastermind guide. So not a lot of time at all.
Yeah, I mean, that happens a lot, which is once you get invited to the interview, they're not going to give you weeks or months to go and prepare for it, right? It's kind of like they're going to give you a few days and then like it's go time, right? And so
Yeah,
that's the other thing, is that if you don't really have a good system or process in place to, and even just like the materials that you need to learn everything that you need for the interviews in like a accelerated and just very like condensed and consolidated manner, then a lot of times you just won't be prepared. Like you're just gonna run out of time. And I mean, everyone knows, like if you miss, a bunch of technical questions because you didn't get a chance to study it, or if your behavior answers are just mediocre because I don't know, you spent all your time trying to cram the technicals, and as a result of that, you have to neglect your behaviorals, like which people do that a lot. Then you're probably not getting the offer, right? So I think like a lot of times it really is just it's a competition to see like who can be the most efficient in the preparation
for
process.
sure.
Because everyone at
And
HBS is all smart and hardworking, and like that's just table stakes, right?
agreed.
Yeah. What were you about to say?
I was gonna say, just to build on that with specific examples, right? Like when it came down to the Super Day invite specifically, there's a million questions that run through your head. You're like, what are they going to ask me? They could literally ask me anything under the sun. Like there's thousands of behavioral questions out there. There's thousands of technical questions. And it's very easy to become overwhelmed and be like, there's so much prep that I need to do. I don't even know what to focus on. And without a platform like Wall Street Mastermind, honestly, you could spend hours just spinning your wheels on where to focus your attention. I think where the really added benefit came in that last couple days, like leading up to the super day, was like I had people like Sam, people like Johnny Wang, who had been through the interview, and they're like, no, these are the questions that you really need to prepare for. Why tech? Why Menlo Park? Why the Menlo Park group specifically? And like even down to the answers, like I had answers built out for those, but they were very helpful in saying, no, this is a weaker one. Like here's actually what you should focus on. Like we've seen successful candidates kind of take this approach in the past, and like it was extremely helpful from that standpoint because it just takes out so much of the guessing work. And then shout out to like the other side of the Wall Street Mastermind community in terms of like the users themselves and the other people on the platform. I had done frankly not enough technical interview prep. Like I said, I did the accelerated program and then tidbits of other videos, but like in general, I didn't feel super strong. And there was another guy on the platform. I'm trying to remember his name. I think it's Panashai Chowchu, and I'm definitely butchering that. But Panachai actually he messaged me. He was like, "Hey Simon, I saw you did the mock interview with Johnny. Best of luck when it comes time for the super day. But just so you know, like here's this really helpful website for technical questions that I've used. It's called IB Vine, and I highly recommend it. I ended up going on IB Vine and spending like hours that weekend just crushing questions. And the great thing about it is like you can filter based on question type, based on question difficulty. You can save questions. It gives all the explanations. And so even a thing like that, I mean, I don't know if I would have gotten the Wall Street. I don't know if I would have gotten the Menlo Park offer had it not been for this random guy Panachai seeing my recruiting video and then offering IB Vine up to me. And I'm like, everything just came full circle in that last week, and it really highlighted like, wow, this is like the value of the platform, and it did
That's awesome.
wonders.
That's awesome,
Yeah,
man. And that's so great that Pinch I did that. But like that's, to be honest, that's like not uncommon inside of Wall Street National. Like I think what most people from outside don't realize is that it really is a very collaborative community, and it's not this like cutthroat environment where everybody's just out for themselves and holding everything close to their vest and not sharing information, and like
yeah,
everybody here is like winning together, right? And I think part of that too is also like people understand that the thing that's unique about Wall Street Management, I think, is really different from a lot of other resources out there. Is that yes, we're here to help you get into banking and here to coach you on networking, interviewing, your resumes, and all of that. But also, like once you're in Wall Street Management, you're in it for life, and this is almost like another professional network of lots of people who are gonna be starting their careers on Wall Street at all the top firms. Just like you're always gonna be a part of the HBS network, and that's a very valuable thing. You're also gonna be always be a part of the Wall Street Mastermind network, and that's a very valuable thing, especially in the future. If you're planning on having a long career in finance, like you never know where a referral for a job is going to come from, or you want to go to the buy side or whatever. And like people in Wall Street Management understand that, and so it's like the more successful everyone else is in the program, the more valuable this network becomes, and everybody wins, right? And
yeah,
so that's like a
yeah,
beautiful thing. And because like we also like, to be honest, like the number of students that we're working with in Wall Street Mastermind is such a small percentage of the overall applicant pool. Um, so there's no scarcity in terms of like, oh well, if you get an offer that I'm not gonna get an offer. Like I think we make up probably like 0.1% of the candidate pool.
right,
And
yeah,
that's also by design too, because like we literally can't work with just like anybody and everybody if we want to like provide. I mean, just like what you described, like just how hands-on we are with each individual. Like we just can't do that in like a super scalable way, right?
yeah,
And so I think, but that's an amazing story with Pancho. I didn't even know he did that, but go
yeah,
tell I'm gonna go tell him thanks. And I mean, I love seeing people in Wall Street Mastermind do stuff like that to help each other out without like me even asking them to do it. Like they just do it, right? Which is awesome.
yeah.
Um,
It's an incredible community.
Yeah, and I think like the last thing I will say too is like because I know we're running out of time here, but you know there's a statistic out there. I think I got this on Mergers and Inquisitions, which is great website with lots of useful information for anyone who wants to get into banking. But like they have an article on like MBA recruiting, and basically the statistic is that I think like if you've gotten into a top business school, like your chances of getting into banking is like a lot higher than like anyone else already. But that's because you've already been through kind of like that selection filter once, right? Like if HBS wants you, you're probably like from the bank's perspective, like you're probably already a pretty good candidate because you have a lot of the traits that um, these investment banks are also looking for, right? But like if
Yeah,
you but I think like even then like when I say it's really high, like I think the statistic is basically if you're at a top MBA, let's call it like a top 20 MBA, probably 40% of the people in these programs who want to get into investment banking actually end up getting in. Okay.
Wow.
Um, and like you can actually look at you can go and look up like the employment reports for a lot of these top MBA programs, and they'll disclose like what percentage of the graduating class is getting into investment banking each year, right? Um, and like obviously every school is different, but I actually looked at this for the top 20 MBA programs a couple of years ago. I would say the average is around like 10% of the graduating class, right? So 10% of the graduating class, or 40% of the people who actually want to get into banking, because not everyone is trying to get into banking, right? If 20% of the class, 25% of the class is trying to get into banking, and 10% of the class is getting in, that's 40%, right?
Yeah.
So 40% of people are actually getting in, and then so 60% of people who want to get in banking, despite being at one of these top programs, are still not getting. That's still the majority of the people. And then
Yeah.
also only 15% of the people that want to get into banking at these top MBA programs get into their top choice bank like you did, right? And so, and that makes a difference. Like being at a great firm and one of the best groups like Morgan Stanley Tech, is very different from just being at any group at any bank, right? Like in terms of, especially like going in as associate, like this is a not like most likely it's not like, oh, 2 year I'm done, right? Like a lot of people going as associate, you're on like the MD track. Like the point is you're most likely gonna, more likely than not, become like a career banker. And so the group you end up at actually matters a lot. Like if you end up at a
For
group
sure.
that wins deals consistently, like that affects like your experience, that affects um how much fees they bring, that affects like their ability to promote people to the senior levels, that affects, you know, how much money you make in the long run. So it affects a lot of things, right? And so I think like no matter what you think about your chances, this is, I know you already know this, but like for our audience, like no matter what you think your chances might be, don't overestimate it just as like, oh, I already got into a great business school, so like I'm a shoe in. Like no, like it's not that easy, right? And then also like even then, like even if you think you are going to get in, like don't just settle for getting in. Like you try to like maximize your probability of getting the best outcome possible, because even even if it might not seem like a huge difference, like it actually can be a huge difference, right?
100%. Yeah.
Um. So anyway, that's
I
like
agree with those sentiments totally, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah, and so like you're already investing so much money to go to business school, like get the best ROI possible, right?
Yeah.
Um. But anyway, that was kind of like the last thing I want to share. But I guess I always like to end on this. But like, do you have any last minute or last piece of advice that you want to share with people who are maybe, you know, about to go to business school, or planning on recruiting for summer associate positions? Like anything that maybe helped you a lot when you were going through it that you want to share with other people?
Yeah, I guess I mean two things. The first, and this is I remember a point that I took away from the secret sauce module, is that one of the biggest probably indicators of you getting into a bank and maybe getting into a bank that's your top choice is just like how gritty are you? How freaking hard are you willing to work? And how much are you going to take advantage of the resources? So like if banking is something that's important to you, and you know you have the added benefit of joining the Wall Street Mastermind program, is just like going with that mindset of like work your ass off because it's definitely worth it, and all the resources are there, so take advantage of them. And just, you know, be gritty, whether it's like in reaching out to hundreds and hundreds of bankers, like even if you're in an MBA program, like go above and beyond and like go through the other channels and try to connect with folks, like have those coffee chats, like do those follow-up emails, like research all those deals and have those ready to talk about, like just go that extra mile because it pays dividends. The second thing that I've come to learn, which is like actually a really like you undervalue it, but it's the mindset of like giving back to the community. And why I learned like this is actually super important. I mean, you look at a platform like Wall Street Mastermind and you see the wolf pack and like all these people who give back, who are on the Slack channel, they've already gotten banking offers, they're now working at banks full time, and they're on the platforms like helping you understand technical questions, or like giving their thoughts on how to approach an interview. Like they're constantly giving back, and to the extent that you can like help and also add to that community, or whatever community you're a part of, actually reinforces the learning process. So one, from like, it's just a good thing to do, but two, it's also selfishly a good thing to do because it helps you learn. And I'll say, like, the added benefit of me being on the Wall Street Mastermind platform is, here at HBS, I was actually able to help a lot of my banking counterparts. Like, the cohort of people recruiting for banking is really small here. It's maybe 25 folks, but those 25 folks, I gave a high amount of advice to, in terms of like how to research a deal on Cap IQ, like how to approach coffee chats, like which technical questions like you should really be able to nail down, things in terms of like how to write an email. Like I kind of shared my learnings and insights from the Wall Street Mastermind program. Thanks, by the way, guys, for giving me that opportunity. And like that really helped my cohort, but also it helped reinforce my learnings. So there is it's mutually beneficial, and I think it goes a long way. So those would be my two takeaways.
Yeah, and that stuff always comes back around, right? Like you're building equity and goodwill with all your classmates or whoever you're helping. And again, like most of your classmates, regardless of whether they get into banking or not, probably going to be very successful in the future and just good contacts to have in your network. And they're not going to forget that, hey, back in the day, Simon helped me out when I was recruiting or whatever, right? And so I think that's really, really good advice. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So I think for those of you who are kind of like still with us, like if you're planning on recruiting at the MBA level, maybe you're incoming MBA, or maybe you already recently started your MBA, and you're committed to breaking into investment banking, like this is what you want to do, and how much you've already invested to go to business school in the first place, and that you want to make sure that you maximize the ROI on that investment, then I would encourage you to reach out to us and just have a chat. Like the way we do things is kind of similar to IB recruiting, actually. Like you can just have like a free virtual coffee chat with one of the alums from our program who has already gone through the process and has already recruited successfully, and you can just talk to them and ask them for anything you want about recruiting, about recruiting advice, the process, timeline, their own experience in Wall Street Mastermind, like whatever you want to know. And then like after that, so that's actually not like a call with us. That's just like a call with one of our alums. And then like after that, if you still decide, hey, I like everything I hear, and this is something that I want to pursue, then they can help set you up for a follow-up call with our team. And then at that point, we'll have a more in-depth chat with you and determine like if or how we might be able to help you and what's the package that makes most sense for you. And like I said, there's a lot of customization involved. And if it's a good fit and we feel confident we can get you the result, then, and like I said, we offer a money back guarantee. And so like if we feel confident enough to offer you that, then and only then will we invite you into the program, right? And so if you guys want to do that, if you want to just take that first step, no obligation whatsoever, by the way, just for talking to us. But like if you just want to have that free virtual coffee chat, you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST. It's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we look forward to talking to you and potentially, hopefully, helping you with this very, very important process. All right. So with that said, Simon, I want to thank you for taking so much time to share your story with us, especially on a super early in the morning for you there. And I know you have final exams coming up. So really, really appreciate you for being so generous with your time. And want to congratulate you again on an amazing outcome. And thank you for helping us continue our streak of just like placing people into MS Tech. 3 or 4 years in a row now. I'm going to try to keep that going.
Let's keep it going.
Yeah, and you guys can all go there and kind of like meet other Wolfpack members or whatever. Actually, you'll probably be their
Keep
boss.
the legacy alive. Keep the
You'll
legacy alive.
You're the first associate candidate. Everyone else is analyst. So there you go. You can boss them around.
That's funny. No. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sam. It's been honestly such a great ride, and I can't underscore enough how much you and your team have helped me. So really appreciate all the hard work that you've put in, not just for me but for everyone else on the platform, and it really it means a lot from our perspective.
Hey, the honor's on my man. So, but yeah, so guys, we're gonna wrap it up here, and thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully, you guys found some valuable insights from this, and we'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. All right, until next time.